Our firm announced bonuses. Everyone got it except me. My boss said you were on maternity leave. Bonuses require full year active. I worked harder than anyone else and exceeded my sales target. So I went straight to HR. No one knew that I'd been silently. The champagne was already being passed around when I walked into the conference room. There she is, Marcus called out, lifting a glass. Come celebrate with us, Sarah. Bonus season, baby. I set my laptop bag down and grabbed one of the printed envelopes from the table. Everyone had one with their name on it. I found mine, opened it, and stared at the single sheet inside. Thank you for your contributions. Unfortunately, based on eligibility requirements, you do not qualify for this year's performance bonus. Around me, people were cheering, clinking glasses, tearing open envelopes and grinning at the numbers inside. Rachel from accounts was hugging someone. Derek was pumping his fist. I read the letter again. Everything okay? Marcus appeared at my elbow, still holding his champagne. I didn't get a bonus. What? I handed him the letter. He scanned it, frowned, then handed it back with something that looked almost like sympathy. Almost. I think that's the maternity thing. The maternity thing. The policy. You have to be actively working the full year to qualify. You were out for 3 months, so. He shrugged. It's just how the policy works. Nothing personal. I looked around the room. 32 people. 32 bonuses. Everyone except me. I exceeded my sales target by 47%, I said. I know. You did great. But the policy is the policy. He clinked his glass against nothing in particular and wandered back toward the celebration. I stood there holding my letter while everyone around me celebrated money I'd earned but wouldn't receive. They'd been pulling things like this for a while. It started before I even went on leave. Little comments from my manager, Richard, about how I'd need to think about priorities once the baby came. Suggestions that maybe I should consider stepping back from the Henderson account because it required too much travel. Concerns about whether I could really handle the pressure of the Q3 push while pregnant. I handled it. I closed Henderson. I hit every single target they set, and then I exceeded them. I worked until 2 weeks before my due date and came back at exactly 12 weeks, not a day more. And the whole time, I kept records. Not because I'm paranoid. Because I'm not stupid. Every email where Richard implied I should take myself off projects. Every meeting where he talked over me or redirected my accounts to other reps. Every time someone made a comment about how I'd probably want to slow down or asked if I was really sure I wanted to keep my client load. I saved it all, screenshots. Forwarded copies to my personal email. Detailed notes with dates and times and witnesses. A folder on my home computer labeled insurance that grew thicker every month. When I came back from leave, my desk had been moved to a smaller cubicle. My parking spot had been reassigned. 3 of my accounts had been temporarily transferred to colleagues who were covering for me, and somehow never got transferred back. I documented all of that too. And now this. A 47% target exceedance. The best numbers on the team. A 3-month absence that every other person in this company was legally entitled to take. No bonus. I left the conference room, walked past my smaller desk, and went straight to HR. Linda Chen's office was on the 4th floor, tucked between the break room and a supply closet. She was eating a salad when I knocked on her open door. Sarah, hi. What can I do for you? I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I need to file a formal complaint. Linda set down her fork. Okay. Have a seat. What's this regarding? I was denied the annual performance bonus despite exceeding my sales target by 47%. The reason given was that I took maternity leave and therefore wasn't actively working for the full year. Right. Linda nodded slowly. That is the policy. Employees need to be actively working for the full calendar year to qualify for performance bonuses. I was actively working for 9 months. I exceeded my targets during those 9 months. The leave I took was legally protected. I understand, but the policy applies equally to everyone. Medical leave, family leave, any extended absence. Has anyone else been denied a bonus this year for taking leave? Linda paused. I'd have to look into that. I can save you the trouble. Derek Morrison took 6 weeks of disability leave after his knee surgery in April. He received a bonus today. I saw him open the envelope. Another pause. Longer this time. I'd have to verify the specifics of his situation. Please do. I pulled a folder from my bag and set it on her desk. While you're at it, here's documentation of every instance over the past 14 months where I've been treated differently than my colleagues. Comments about my pregnancy affecting my work. Accounts reassigned without explanation. My desk moved to a smaller space while I was on leave. Performance opportunities redirected to male colleagues. Linda didn't touch the folder. She looked at it like it might bite her. Sarah, I think you might be. I'm not doing anything except filing a formal complaint. I'd like written confirmation that this complaint has been received and will be investigated. I'd also like a copy of the company's bonus eligibility policy, including any documentation of when that policy was implemented and how it's been applied historically. I'll need to talk to Richard and... Richard is part of the complaint. I'd prefer someone impartial handles this. Linda finally picked up the folder. Opened it. I watched her face as she started reading. The first page was the email where Richard wrote to another manager that he was concerned about Sarah's commitment level going forward 3 weeks after I told him I was pregnant. Linda's expression didn't change, but she stopped eating her salad. I'll escalate this to corporate HR, she said quietly. Thank you. I'd like that confirmation in writing by end of business today. I stood up and left her office. The confirmation email came at 4:47 p.m. Standard corporate language acknowledging receipt of my complaint and promising a thorough and impartial review. I forwarded it to my personal email and saved a screenshot. The next morning, Richard called me into his office. Close the door, he said. I closed it but didn't sit down. I heard you went to HR yesterday. I filed a formal complaint, yes. Richard leaned back in his chair. He was 53, had been with the company for 21 years, and had never once had a female sales rep on his team stay longer than 18 months. I'd looked it up. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Look, he said, I think there's been some miscommunication here. The bonus thing, that's just policy. It's not personal. It's not about you being a mom or whatever. It's about the rules applying equally to everyone. Derek Morrison got a bonus after 6 weeks of disability leave. That's different. How? His situation was medical, documented. It was an injury. Maternity leave is medical leave. It's documented. I gave birth. That's a medical event. Richard's jaw tightened. You know what I mean. I really don't. He stood up and moved around his desk, closer to me. Not threatening exactly, but deliberate. Sarah, you're a good salesperson. You've got a future here if you don't burn bridges. HR complaints, lawyers, all that stuff, it makes people uncomfortable. It makes them think you're difficult to work with. I haven't mentioned lawyers. You know what I'm saying. I know exactly what you're saying. I took a step back toward the door. Is there anything else? I'm trying to help you here. You file complaints, make accusations, it follows you. Other companies do background checks. They call references. You want to be known as the woman who sued her employer? I haven't sued anyone. I filed an HR complaint about being denied compensation I earned. So far. He crossed his arms. But we both know where this is heading. Do we? Come on. We can resolve this internally. I'll talk to the finance team, see if there's some kind of discretionary fund we can pull from. Get you a partial bonus, something to make this go away. I exceeded my target by 47%. I want the full bonus that everyone else with my performance received. That's not going to happen. The policy is what it is. Then I guess we're done here. I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, I heard Richard mutter something under his breath. I didn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. That night, I updated my documentation folder with a detailed account of the conversation. Every word I could remember. The implication about future employment. The offer to make it go away. The physical positioning meant to intimidate. Then I made a phone call. My attorney's name was Diane Reeves. I'd found her 6 months earlier, during my maternity leave, when I'd realized that things were probably going to go badly when I returned. We'd had 3 consultations already. She knew the case. She'd reviewed my documentation. So they denied the bonus, she said when I called. And my manager just cornered me in his office to warn me that filing complaints would hurt my career. Did you record it? No. But I wrote everything down immediately after. Good. That's admissible as a contemporaneous account. I heard her typing. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give corporate HR exactly 2 weeks to respond to your complaint. If they don't resolve this, full bonus, no retaliation, and documentation that the policy will be reviewed, we file with the EEOC. Okay. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission will investigate. They'll look at how the bonus policy has been applied historically. They'll interview witnesses. They'll subpoena emails. I have most of the emails already. I know you do. That's why I love this case. I could hear her smile through the phone. Sarah, companies do this all the time because people let them. They know most employees won't fight back. They count on it. I'm not most employees. No, you're not. 2 weeks. We give them a chance to make this right. After that, we go federal. The next 2 weeks were exactly what I expected. Corporate HR sent an investigator named Malcolm. He was polite, thorough, and clearly trying to find a way to make this disappear without anyone getting in trouble. He interviewed me for 2 hours, asked me to walk through my documentation, took copies of everything, nodded sympathetically at all the right moments. Then he interviewed Richard. And then 3 of my male colleagues. And then Linda Chen. I don't know what any of them said. But I know what happened next. On day 12, I got an email from corporate HR offering me a goodwill payment of $8,500, roughly 40% of what my bonus should have been based on my performance numbers. The email included a settlement agreement. Standard stuff. Accept the payment, agree not to pursue legal action, and sign a non-disclosure agreement promising never to discuss the matter publicly. I forwarded the email to Diane. "They're scared," she said. "This offer tells me they know they're exposed. It's not what I'm owed." "No, it's not. Do you want a counter?" "No. I want what I earned. And I want them to change the policy." Then we file. The EEOC complaint went in the next morning. If you've never filed a federal discrimination complaint, the process is slower than you'd expect but more thorough than most companies realize. The EEOC doesn't just take your word for it. They investigate. They send formal requests for documentation. They interview witnesses under protocols that make lying significantly more risky. And they look for patterns. That's what Richard didn't understand. He thought this was about one bonus. One employee. One isolated decision that could be explained away with policy language and plausible deniability. But the EEOC looked at 5 years of data. Every bonus decision. Every performance review. Every employee who took leave and what happened to them afterward. They found exactly what I'd suspected. In the past 5 years, 11 employees had taken extended leave, medical, family, or otherwise. 7 were men. 4 were women. All 7 men received their performance bonuses. None of the 4 women did. The policy about full-year active work existed on paper, but it had only ever been applied to women who took maternity leave. Men who took disability leave, men who took family leave for sick parents, men who took extended bereavement, all of them got bonuses. The policy wasn't neutral. It was selective enforcement. And selective enforcement, as it turned out, was textbook discrimination. The EEOC findings came back 5 months after I filed. By then, I'd been moved to a different team, officially a lateral transfer, though everyone knew what it really was. My new manager was fine. My new desk was in a corner by the emergency exit. My accounts had been permanently reassigned. But I was still there. Still showing up. Still documenting. The findings letter was 17 pages long. I read it 3 times. The commission found reasonable cause to believe that my employer had engaged in sex discrimination in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. The uneven application of the bonus eligibility policy constituted disparate treatment. The pattern of behavior following my pregnancy announcement and maternity leave suggested retaliation. They recommended conciliation, essentially, a mediated settlement before litigation. My employer had 30 days to respond. They responded on day 29 with a counteroffer, full back bonus payment plus an additional $20,000. Policy review with outside counsel. No admission of wrongdoing, NDA. Diane called me that night. "It's a reasonable offer," she said. "For most people, I'd recommend taking it. But you've got something most plaintiffs don't have. You've got documentation that goes back 14 months. You've got a clear pattern of disparate treatment. You've got contemporaneous notes of your manager threatening your career. And you've got the EEOC on your side." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if you want to fight this all the way, we have a real shot. Not just at settlement money. At precedent. At making them actually change." "What's the downside?" "Time. It could take another year, maybe 2. Legal fees, though we're working on contingency, so that's my problem, not yours. And stress. Trials are exhausting. Discovery is invasive. They'll dig through your work history, your personnel file, everything." I thought about my daughter. 6 months old now, just starting to laugh at things. Thought about the months of documentation. The smaller desk. The reassigned accounts. The champagne party where everyone celebrated except me. I want to fight. Then we fight. The lawsuit was filed in federal district court 3 weeks later. If you've never been part of a workplace discrimination lawsuit, here's what they don't tell you: everyone finds out. Everyone. The filing was public record. Someone at the company, probably someone in legal, leaked the news within hours. By the next morning, I was getting texts from former colleagues. Some supportive. Some not. "Heard you're suing the company. Good for you. Are you serious right now? This is going to make things weird for everyone. My wife went through something similar. Call me if you need to talk. You're being really selfish about this." I stopped responding after the first day. Turned off notifications. Focused on work. Yes, I kept working there. People always ask about that, like it's strange to stay at a company you're suing. But here's the thing. If I quit, they could claim I abandoned my job voluntarily. That I wasn't really harmed. That I had other options and chose to leave. Staying was strategic. It was also, in its own way, satisfying. Every morning I walked past Richard's office. Every week I submitted my sales reports. Every month I exceeded my targets, because of course I did. I was still the best salesperson they had, even with the worst accounts and the smallest desk. And every time Richard saw me, he had to remember that I was still there. Still performing. Still refusing to disappear. Discovery was exactly as invasive as Diane had warned. Their lawyers requested every email I'd sent or received for the past 3 years. Every text message related to work. Every performance review, every sales report, every piece of documentation. I provided all of it, happily. Because Discovery works both ways. We requested their internal communications about the bonus policy. About me specifically. About maternity leave decisions. About every conversation Richard had with HR or legal about my situation. What we found was worse than I'd expected. There was an email chain from 2 years earlier, before I was even pregnant, where Richard and another senior manager discussed the maternity problem on the sales team. They joked about how women with kids were part-timers in disguise. They speculated about which female reps would be next to get knocked up and disappear. When I announced my pregnancy, Richard had forwarded the announcement to that same manager with a single word, called it. There was a thread from my maternity leave where Richard and the VP of sales discussed whether it was worth it to keep my position open. Whether they could restructure the team in a way that would make my return optional. There were internal HR notes Linda Chen had written, documenting her concerns about legal exposure if they denied bonuses too visibly. Notes recommending they apply the policy consistently enough to create cover. Notes, in other words, proving they knew exactly what they were doing. Diane called me when she finished reviewing the Discovery documents. They're done, she said. They just don't know it yet. The mediation happened 8 months after we filed suit. By then, the company had cycled through 2 law firms. The first had reviewed the Discovery materials and apparently recommended settling immediately. The company's general counsel disagreed. The firm withdrew. The second firm was more aggressive. They filed motions to dismiss, motions to exclude evidence, motions to compel me to sign a protective order that would seal the entire case. All of them were denied. When we finally sat down in the mediator's conference room, their side of the table looked exhausted. Richard wasn't there. Neither was the VP of sales. The company was represented by their general counsel, a woman named Patricia who I'd never met, and 2 lawyers from the second firm who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Our side was me, Diane, and a paralegal named Marcus who kept the documents organized. The mediator was a retired federal judge named Harrison. He'd seen cases like this before. His opening remarks made that clear. I've reviewed the submissions from both parties, he said. I've read the EEOC findings. I've reviewed the Discovery materials that are likely to be admitted at trial. He looked at the company's side of the table. I want to be direct. The documentation in this case is unusually thorough. The email communications are problematic. If this goes to a jury, you're looking at substantial exposure. Patricia shifted in her seat. We're prepared to discuss resolution. That's why we're here. The first offer was $150,000. Full back bonus plus damages plus attorney fees. Policy review, NDA. Diane didn't even look at me, no. What's your number? 400,000. Public acknowledgement of the policy change. No NDA. Patricia actually laughed. That's not happening. The acknowledgement alone is the point, I said. Everyone looked at me. I don't care about the money. Not really. I care about the fact that you knew the policy was discriminatory and you applied it anyway. I care about the fact that you joked about women getting knocked up and disappearing. I care about the fact that Linda Chen documented her concerns about legal exposure and then helped you do it anyway. Sarah, Patricia said carefully, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I'm clear. You can pay me to go away quietly, but that's going to cost more than $400,000. A lot more. Because if I go quietly, you'll do this again. You'll do it to the next woman who gets pregnant. And the next. And eventually one of them won't have documentation, and you'll get away with it. We can't do a public acknowledgement. The board would never. Then I'll see you at trial. We broke for an hour. Diane and I walked to a coffee shop down the street. You know they're going to come back with something, she said. They're scared. The Discovery materials are devastating. What do you think they'll offer? 300. Maybe 350. With some kind of policy commitment that's not quite public but close. And you think I should take it? Diane stirred her coffee. I think you've already won. The EEOC findings are public. The case filing is public. Anyone who searches the company's name will find this. They're going to change their policies whether they admit it or not, because the alternative is doing this again with the next pregnant employee who bothers to keep records. But if you want to go to trial, we go to trial. You've got the documentation. You've got the pattern evidence. You've got their own words proving they knew what they were doing. A jury in this district? Probably sympathetic. What's the risk? Time. Another 6 to 8 months, minimum. And trials are unpredictable. Anything can happen. I thought about my daughter. A year old now. Walking, sort of. Babbling in ways that almost sounded like words. Thought about the months I'd already spent on this. The energy. The constant documentation. Make them put the policy change in writing, I said. Make them commit to third-party review. And I want Richard gone. Diane raised an eyebrow. Gone as in fired? Gone as in no longer managing women. Demoted, transferred, I don't care. But he doesn't get to supervise another female employee, ever. That's unusual. So is a 14-month documentation trail and their own emails calling pregnant women part-timers in disguise. Diane smiled. I'll see what I can do. The final settlement was $325,000. The bonus policy was revised to explicitly include protected leave in the eligibility calculation. The new policy would be reviewed annually by an outside employment law firm. Richard was reassigned to a non-supervisory role in a different division. His email about me getting knocked up became part of mandatory training for all managers, anonymized but recognizable to anyone who knew the case. There was no public acknowledgement. But there was no NDA either. I could talk about what happened to anyone I wanted. The settlement was finalized on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 18 months after I'd opened that envelope at the champagne party. I resigned 2 weeks later. Not because I had to. Not because they pushed me out. Because I was done. Diane had warned me this might happen. A lot of plaintiffs think they want to stay and prove something, she said. But once you've fought the fight, staying feels different. You've already won. The building just reminds you of the battle. She was right. I walked into Richard's old office, now occupied by someone I didn't know, and submitted my resignation to HR. 2 weeks' notice, professional, clean. Linda Chen processed the paperwork herself. She didn't make eye contact. I'll need you to sign these exit documents, she said. Of course. And there's an exit interview option. It's voluntary. I'll pass. She slid the papers across the desk. I signed them. Handed them back. Stood up. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm glad you pushed back. No, you're not. She didn't argue. I cleaned out my desk, my real desk, the smaller one they'd moved me to, in about 15 minutes. There wasn't much. I'd been slowly taking things home for months, ever since I realized how this was going to end. On my last day, I walked out through the front lobby at exactly 5 p.m. A few people waved. A few people pretended not to see me. Richard was nowhere in sight, probably avoiding the floor entirely. I didn't look back. 3 months later, I got a call from a woman named Jessica. She worked at the same company, different division. She'd just told her manager she was pregnant. I heard about your case, she said. Not the details, but enough. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. How do I protect myself? I thought about everything I'd learned. The documentation. The emails. The contemporaneous notes. The pattern evidence. The way small things add up into big things if you're paying attention. Start keeping records, I said, today. Not because anything bad has happened yet, but because if it does, you'll want to remember exactly what was said and when. That seems paranoid. It is paranoid. It's also smart. I paused. They changed the bonus policy after my case. But policies are only as good as the people enforcing them. If your manager starts doing anything that feels wrong, comments about your commitment, questions about your priorities, accounts getting redirected, write it down. Screenshot emails. Forward anything important to your personal address. And if nothing happens? Then you'll have a folder full of documentation you'll never need. That's the best case scenario. Okay. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you. I know you didn't have to talk to me. I know what it's like to be the only one fighting. You don't have to be alone in it. I gave her Diane's number before we hung up. The settlement money sat in my account for 2 months before I decided what to do with it. Part of it went into my daughter's education fund. Part of it went to paying off my car. Part of it sat in savings, a buffer against whatever came next. And part of it went to a nonprofit that provides legal assistance to workers facing discrimination. They'd help fund part of my case, back when I wasn't sure I could afford to fight. Paying it forward felt right. I found a new job 4 months after I resigned. Different industry. Different culture. When I interviewed, they asked about my previous employer. I told them the truth. I'd left after a legal dispute about how they handled maternity leave. The hiring manager nodded. I read about that case. It was public. It was impressive. She leaned forward. We do things differently here. Parental leave is fully paid, 18 weeks, and it doesn't affect bonuses or promotions. We have that in writing, reviewed by outside counsel every year. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And because lawsuits are expensive. She smiled slightly. We'd rather just treat people fairly from the start. I took the job. Richard, I heard later, left the company 8 months after the settlement. The official story was that he wanted to pursue other opportunities. The unofficial story was that 3 more women had come forward with complaints after my case went public, and the company decided he was more liability than he was worth. He's at a smaller firm now, I think. No direct reports. Linda Chen still works in HR. I see her LinkedIn updates occasionally. She got promoted last year. I try not to think about what that means. The company itself is doing fine, financially. They settled my case, implemented the policy changes, did their mandatory training, and moved on. That's how these things usually go. Institutions absorb consequences and keep functioning. But something changed too. Not visibly. Not in the corporate reports or the press releases. But in the stories that circulated afterward. The women who heard about what happened. The managers who got a little more careful about what they put in writing. I heard from 6 women in the year after the settlement. Different companies, different industries, same patterns. They'd read about my case. They wanted to know how to fight back. I told them all the same thing. Document everything. From day one. Not because you expect the worst, but because if the worst happens, you need to be ready. Most of them never needed their documentation. A few of them did. My daughter is 3 now. She doesn't know any of this, obviously. Won't know for years, maybe decades. But someday I'll tell her about the champagne party where everyone celebrated except me. About the folder on my computer labeled insurance. About the 18 months I spent proving that what they did was wrong. Not to make her proud of me, though I hope she will be. But to teach her something I learned the hard way. People will tell you that fighting back makes you difficult. That keeping records makes you paranoid. That expecting fairness makes you naive. They'll offer you partial solutions and ask you to accept them quietly. They'll warn you about burned bridges and damaged reputations. They're not wrong exactly. There are costs to fighting. But there are costs to not fighting too. Costs that add up over years and careers and generations. Costs that other people pay when you don't. I think about the woman who would have worked at that company 5 years after me. The one who would have gotten pregnant and seen her accounts reassigned and been denied her bonus because of a policy that only applied to mothers. She doesn't exist now. The policy changed. The pattern stopped. That's worth something. That's worth more than the settlement, honestly. More than the money or the vindication or the satisfaction of watching Richard get demoted. One less woman will go through what I went through. One more company learned that discrimination has consequences. One more person proved that documentation matters. Last week, I got an email from Jessica. The woman I'd talked to 3 years ago, the one who was pregnant and scared and asking how to protect herself. She'd had her baby. Taken her leave. Come back to work. Everything went fine. No comments about her commitment. No reassigned accounts. No smaller desk. Her bonus, when it came, was calculated fairly. I never needed the documentation, she wrote. But I kept it anyway. Just in case. Thank you for teaching me that. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. The file on my home computer is still there. 14 months of screenshots and emails and notes. I haven't opened it in 2 years, but I'll never delete it. Some records you keep forever. Not because you need them anymore. But because they remind you what you're capable of when someone tells you to stay quiet and you decide, instead, to fight.